今月の医学教育セミナーを始めたいと思います。実は特別な会です。今日お招きしたのは、アリー・ローテン先生です。ちょっと長くなりますが、ご紹介をちょっと深めにさせていただきます。日本の医学教育学会というのは1969年に設立されました。そして1973年に、WHO 西太平洋地域の事業として、シドニーじゃないかな、シドニーですね、シドニーにあるニューサウスウェールズ大学に、ティーチャーズトレーニングセンター TTC というものが作られ、日本から、その当時、医学教育に熱意のある医学部長の先生方がそこで学ばれました。文献によりますと、1973年の6月の最初には、今100歳になられた日野原重明先生、それから牛場泰造先生、慶応の細菌学の先生でもうお亡くなりになりましたが、泰造牛場。その後、女子医大の吉岡先生、岐阜の小島先生、帝京の鈴木純一先生、筑波の堀源一先生、防衛医大にいらっしゃった田中先生などなど、東大からは森渉先生、先日亡くなられましたが、森渉先生などがこの TTC で医学教育のトレーニングを受けられました。これがきっかけで、富士山のふもとで我々がよく富士セミナーと言っている、医学教育セミナーが開催され、現在まで医学教育学会と文部省並びに文科省並びに厚生労働省の共催で、引き続きやられております。GIO とか SBO とか、その医学教育で特殊な言葉がありますよね。あれが広まったのがこのセミナーと聞いております。その当時は行動科学による医学教育がスタートしたばかりで、我々多分日本の教育者にとっては極めて斬新な発想であったと思います。そこに、言ってみれば日本の医学教育の原点があります。その TTC で、実は教鞭を取られた、あるいはファシリテーターをされていたのが今日お招きした有先生です。まだお若いのに驚くんですが、それが1976年ですから、多分有先生も今から30年以上前、30年近く前ですから、きっとお若かったと思います。You must be young at the 1970s. Yeah. そして、今日お招きできたのはもう一つ奇遇があります。この我々のいる医学教育センターが、5年前からラオスで、ラオスの医学教育に関して国際協力をやっていました。その時に、ラオスで、有先生に、大西先生並びに北村がお会いしました。で、シドニーというかオーストラリアのチームが来ているということで、お話をすると、今お話したことが分かったんです。みたいな感じで、オーストラリアからラオスに来ているチームが、その中の有先生が我々の医学教育の原点であるということがラオスで判明し、ならばぜひ日本に来たときに講演していただきたいと、ラオスで約束しました。それが今日です。ということで、今お聞きしたら、ラオス、カンボジアの国際協力は今も続けておられて、This month カンボジア、今月はカンボジア、そして7月はラオスへいらっしゃるそうです。ちょっと前置きが長くなりましたが、今日はそういうことで、 その医学教育のリソース、人材の養成ということでお話をいただきます。そんなに参加者多くないので、できるだけ前に来ていただいて、先生、インタラクティブレクチャーでお話しされるということで、おそらく質問は自由にということで。Thank you. Please, Dr.
It's an advantage not to know what he said because it's less embarrassing. But I would like very much if we can conduct this meeting.
Would you use microphone? Because broadcasting.
I was hoping for an informal type of approach, and I was hoping that we can really have more of an interaction rather than a lecture. I got a little bit cornered. Dr. Onishi heard that I'm coming to Japan. I'm coming every year to conduct at the NIPH, at the National Institute of Public Health. They've got an international course on leadership in human resources, sponsored by JICA, and they invite me every year to contribute to this activity. I met Dr. Onishi in Laos as part of our work in international work, and I'm obliged and I'm very happy to be here with you today. I was asked to say something about the old days, how it started, and somehow I was lucky to be from the beginning of something that was a movement in medical education. In my case, it was by accident. I did not study medicine, and I did not intend to be involved in medical education. I studied psychology and education, and my wife, Australian, I'm from Israel. After doing the PhD, we got to Sydney, to Sydney in Australia, and I was invited to join the University of New South Wales. We were just establishing a center for educational development, center for teacher training for the health professions. At that time, the World Health Organization was very keen to improve medical education, to find the ways to improve medical education. Everybody was saying that there is a big problem, that the teachers, of course, are good doctors, they are good nurses, but they are not good teachers. The curriculum was not really structured in a way that was preparing the students to be a good practitioner. That the curriculum was still very traditional, fragmented, based very much on what the specialists know, on the basic science, but not very much integrated in a way to prepare the students for job. So the World Health Organization decided to establish 6 centers in the world. That was 73, but actively it was 1975, and that's when I joined. And it was a global strategy. And they established 6 centers according to the 6 regions of the WHO. In Africa, in America, in Southeast Asia, we were the West Pacific. So we were selected to be the center that included Japan and China. We had the smallest countries in the Pacific, some countries only a few hundred people, and the biggest countries like China and Japan. And at that time, the people were selected from these regions to go to Illinois, University of Illinois in America. That was the international center. There were some very, very capable people there. And they were sent for 2 months or 3 months to become the cadre, to become the resource people, to start this movement that will bring about change in medical education. And so there were a lot of what we call inter-country workshops. This means workshops with people coming from different countries, and fellowships and all kinds of activities in order to develop this movement. So we are talking now more than 30 years ago. We're talking about 1975, 1976. And if you want to ask me honestly what I think, I don't think that anything big changed. The same things that were important then are still important today. I know there is many journals, and some of you may be specialists in this area, and there is a lot of research, but in my experience, in the work that I'm doing at the grassroots level, we mentioned about Laos or Cambodia, but it can be also in Israel, it can be in Japan, in other countries. Maybe there is some new technology, of course, there is some new things that people are using, but the principles of education, what is really important, in my mind, is still the same. And I don't know if this is disappointing to say, or this is exciting to say. I don't know. In some way it is disappointing. You say, we invited this person, he's supposed to be an expert, and he's saying nothing. But I really can't see that much has changed from the very basic principle. And the very basic principle is people learn by doing. People learn by practice. We can make all kinds of things to simulate, to make a simulation of the practice. We can use problem-based learning. We can use scenario. We can use OSCE. We can use all kinds of technique. But basically, what it comes down to, if we want to have good education, we need to create a good environment where the student can be exposed and can practice a skill. And in my mind, this principle that we talked about in 1975, 1976 has not changed until today. And in my mind, the problem with education is still the same, that we are giving too much theory, we are giving too much information and knowledge, but we are not giving enough opportunity for students to practice. This is my bottom line belief. So the revolution, if you like, the kind of factors that we were talking about then, and I think we are still talking about today, is how to create a reflective practitioner, a practitioner who is able to think, able to reflect. We are talking about how to develop the cognitive skill, and maybe I can say a little bit more about that, about the cognitive skill, which basically means the ability to think, the ability to analyze, the ability to manage knowledge. And we are talking about how to create people who can apply the knowledge. Not only to have the knowledge, but to be able to apply the knowledge according to the situation, according to what they are doing. This is really, I think, the principles that we've been talking about a lot for many, many years ago. And around this, there is all kind of other words that you will find, I'm sure that you are using and you will find in the literature. I will just list some of them. Competency-based. I think that we realize today that if we want to prepare people for the work, for the job, we need to understand the competency they need. If we understand, if the teacher can understand the competency, if the student can understand the competency, the conditions under which the student, the graduate, will be working, then we can design the instruction to prepare them for this competence. We can give them the practice and the exposure so that they can learn this competence. The focus is on the student and the student ability to perform the competence. When I say the focus is on the student, it's because we believe that if the student is doing, the student would learn. If the teacher is doing, the teacher will learn. If the teacher is doing a lot of lecture, and a lot of preparation, a lot of activity, the teacher knows more and more. But this does not mean the student knows more and more. If we really want education, we need to focus on the student. And we are focusing on skill development, not on the content, because we know that we cannot cover the whole content. The content is all the time multiplying, and we can only give a sample of the content. What we want is a student who is capable of finding the content when they need it. They know how to manage knowledge, how to find information, how to apply information. So all these ideas that unless the teacher is going to say it, the student would not learn it, this is not what we think education is about. The teacher has to expose exciting ideas, have to give guidance, have to highlight, but it's the student that really need to learn how to find it. So the skills that we are talking about under cognitive skill is how to learn how to learn how to solve problems, learn how to use information, learn how to reason, how to use the mind to reason and to find solutions. And what we are finding more and more talk today about is about leadership, how to be a leader, how to be a change agent. And I will come back to this in a minute. And finally, the whole orientation toward the community, toward the population, not only toward the hospital. So clinical skills, cognitive skills, learning how to learn, communication skills. You know that this has been a very, very popular topic in a lot of the literature because there is so much complaint about it from the community and the population that the doctor does not know how to communicate, how to explain it. Today, this is a very serious matter because we know that over 80%, I think it's almost 90% of the complaints, formal complaints in medicine is related to inappropriate communication. If only the communication was good, even though the doctor made the mistake, maybe there would not have been a legal action. But most of the legal actions are result of inappropriate communication. That the patient feel no respect, they feel there was no informed consent, nobody told me that they are going to do something like this to me, nobody explained to me what is the risk, nobody explained to me all these kind of things, and so the whole industry around informed consent has to do with risk management, with managing the risk, and how to make sure that the doctor ethically explain appropriately to the patient what will happen. And there's many case studies, very interesting case studies about it to do with communication. The capacity for lifelong learning, and of course today we need to learn more about how to use the information technology because we are more interested sometimes in blended learning, face-to-face, but also online. This is very convenient for the students to be able to access information on the online and their own time and their own speed. There's been more emphasis on behavioral and social science, not just the biological science, more emphasis on health promotion, on population health, on healthcare systems, how the whole thing works, on cost containment, because the idea is that the doctor is not only giving medicine, but they're also generating a cost. And they need to understand the cost of their decision, and they need to think about what is the most efficient way to deal with the patient, the social accountability and the ethical issue. I'm just throwing many words like this because this is what you can find in the literature. This is what people are writing about. Skill labs is now a new method of providing opportunity for the student to practice, and this center has done a good contribution in Laos in developing a skill lab in a hospital where there are models and there are all kinds of other ways to learn to practice. Simulated patients, flexible delivery. We like very much the idea of small group learning because it enables interaction. I feel that lecture has to be very limited, and we have to spend most of our time facilitating learning in small group, which is encouraging self-directed learning, for this learning to come from the student, problem solving, giving them opportunity for in-depth study, to take something and to focus more deeply, and to be analytical and to do research and to write, to develop this capacity to be a scholar. Elective programs, which are very important for people, so that they can really have passion, have some interest in something that is particularly interesting for them. So we are going away. And when I say we are, it's not today. This is for the last 30 years we are talking about the same thing. Going away from examining the retention of fact, memorizing, which anyhow, after a while, is not going to be there anymore. It's easy, but it's not really meaningful. And rather to try to evaluate performance and application, the ability for people to do things and to apply what they've learned. To me, it sounds so commonsensical, but if we still look at most medical school, multiple choice questions, essay, all kind of methods of examination, which is examining content, memory, not application, not ability to practice. We are going away from the apprenticeship. The medical student or the nurse is going after the boss and look what they do and try by osmosis to get something, to imitate, but very often not really in a structured way practicing the skill that they need to practice. We are going away from this sharp division between pre-medical, basic science, clinical science, all this division, and the integration, thinking about how to integrate, how to have a early clinical exposure, so the students from the beginning, they understand what they learn and can link it to the clinical practice, and all kind of other reasons for fragmentation, because many of the teachers are very specialized, and about the specialists we know that they know more and more about less and less. Yeah? They know about a very limited area but it doesn't fit together. Recently, I think in 2010, there has been an important article in The Lancet about transformative education. There was a commission with very important people that looked again at medical education, and they did a review of the situation. They noted that there is now thousands and thousands of medical schools, and they looked at what they are doing, and they identified three major generations. They are talking about the early days where the emphasis was on the scientific curriculum, the Flexner, that the emphasis was on teaching basic science, anatomy and physiology and pathology, and really making sure that the students understand very well all the scientists. And then maybe in the 60s or the 70s, this is where we got into the picture. The emphasis moved to the problem-based learning, where there was now more emphasis on developing the ability to think, not only to learn basic facts, but to try to move to application. And they are saying that we are moving now to a system-based approach, which is competency-based, where we are really trying to understand how we can make a difference to the health system, how we can produce people that can solve the problem and improve the health of the population, so that they are really learning competencies that are needed in order to improve the health system. So you can say, if this is problem-based learning, this is practice-based learning, okay? But the emphasis is very much on development of leadership, advocacy, really looking at the health profession as an agent of change, not only as a technician who can solve health problems, but as a social agent that is supposed to do something to improve the health system. So they are talking about the three levels of being informative, which is the basic thing, the information, the skills, and this was done, the product of this is experts. The formative stage level, which is socializing, learning the values, learning the attitude, learning the mentality of being a healer, of being a doctor, of being a health professional. And the outcome of this is being a professional. And this is why we always say you cannot make the medical school too short, because maybe you can teach the subject matter quickly, but the socialization takes time. You have to live in the hospital. You have to live, you have to do the work, and that's the only way that you can internalize. And now we're talking about transformative, which is really the objective is leadership, becoming a change agent, doing something about the problems we have in this world, that we still have got so many people dying unnecessarily. If it is malaria, if it is diarrhea, if it is all kind of non-communicable disease, diabetes and other things, how can the whole health profession be a change for change to bring about the change? When I read this article, this commission report, I have two feelings. One feeling, I think this is validating what I believe. We always say, so it is validating what I believe. But I also feel frustrated because they write it as if this is something new. They are not really giving sufficient recognition that many people everywhere have been trying to do these things for a very long time. And in that sense, I come to to the beginning of what I say, and that is that there is really nothing new under the sun. We knew these things, and it's still a matter of trying to achieve them. But I don't think that this is completely a new trend or a new insight. It was true then, and it is true now. Maybe if you don't mind, if I can stop before I continue and just ask you, do you think differently from me? I mean, please, I would be very interested if you've got any views about that, because I'm really arguing here that what we need to do is to put more energy to implement something that we know for a long time, rather than to do something completely different than you. That's what I'm arguing. I'm very interested if you've got any comments that you would like to make on that. Do you think I'm oversimplifying?
Guys, I attend these lectures, but I also I teach medical English to medical students, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying here. And I'm not a clinical doctor, so I don't see how other aspects of medicine are taught, either in the classroom or the lecture hall or in the hospital. But one thing that I don't think you've mentioned, I'd just like to know whether this was included in any of these categories or approaches, but one of my principles is learn to walk before you run. And many of my students, being very ambitious and qualified in their way, as soon as we begin to practice, let's say, meeting a patient, taking a history and so on, they want to leap immediately to diagnosis. But I say, relax. First learn how to talk to the patient and ask a few simple questions. And the next time we can do a little bit more than that, and the third time we'll do yet more. Something about the progressive nature, starting with really just the simplest basics and then moving on. That might apply to many other fields of medical training as well. What do you think?
You are saying that there is still a sequence, and there is still a sequence that we need to take into consideration, and we need to I think that in this regard, one can say that the role of the teacher is more like an engineer who is creating, an engineer who is structuring learning situations that are appropriate for learning, rather than just a transmitter of information. The good teacher can really construct appropriate structures that are appropriate to the steps, as you say, and really lead one in a way which is I completely agree with you that sometimes we have to hold back, sometimes we have to encourage forward, but the main thing is the message that we need to give, in my view, from the very beginning. You are here to learn how to apply what you learn. You are not here to just learn things. You are here to learn how to apply, how to use. We cannot give you all the information that you need. You will need to know how to find information, and you will need to know how to make use of information in order to solve problems, in order to do things. If we can give them this confidence and this attitude, I think that we create a professional that is going to be a leader and so forth. But if we only create somebody who believes that they need to wait until we feed them step by step, and and they don't trust themselves in terms of finding, I think we're not giving them the opportunity to be what they can be. That's my concern. But it's a very good point about the sequence. Any other comments?
I'm very agree with you, basically. But in the medical area, there's so many things to learn, and it's complicated. So in my area, that for the training for pharmaceutical medical reps, we want to try this method, but the student or learner must learn a lot of things, so they are very confusing.
For the student?
Yes, the aim is the same. They must to do their job, but before the jobs, they must learn a lot of things to show time.
Right.
Yeah.
And therefore you feel a need to give them a lot of information? Or
No.
No.
I don't think so. But in Japan, we are less experienced for that kind of training method.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So this is a classical problem that you are raising. There is so much content, there is so much information. How do we transfer all of this information in a short time? And I guess the teacher very often feel more comfortable if they lecture about it, because they say, I did my job. I did my job. I informed the student about this. Okay. But it's very challenging how to do it in a way that will be self-directed.
In Japan, 8 years ago, we make a core curriculum. So in the core curriculum, we have more than 600 SBOs, maybe 60 or 70 GIO. So we are so busy to teach these SBOs.
That was another SBO, you remember, is specific behavioral objective and general specific. And the objective, of course, has a very good purpose. It's a good way to communicate what we want the student to learn. But again, if we do too many, it becomes meaningless in a way. And I think it becomes a lot of busy work, and we find that the teacher is spending a lot of time writing objectives, but not enough time to really interact with the students, and not enough time to really do the educational thing. So I think objectives are very important as part of a lesson plan. You know, we need to have a lesson plan. I advocate that every teacher must prepare some lesson plan, and the lesson plan is including the important objectives, the content material, of course, that relates to that. Most importantly, they need to include what the student will do in order to learn, what will be the activity for the student in relation to this objective. So we can call it the learning task, the instructional task, or the learning activity. This means what is the thing that the student has to do in order to learn. And finally, of course, how we can assess it. And what we are trying to do now in many places is to help the teacher make a lesson plan which would link between the objective and the content and the activity and the assessment. And this needs to be compared to the overall competency to make sure that it's covered. So we call it mapping the curriculum. We create a map of the curriculum which is linking all of this. So I'm not against the objective, but it has to be in a good proportion. If we break it too much, it becomes too busy. And That's my feeling. Okay, so I told you my bias, and I'm very happy to discuss more the bias. I mean, I come to it from an educational perspective, and I always like to demonstrate it by saying the door is closed. And if I try to teach, I try to push information when the door is closed. I have to work very hard to push because the door is closed. But if I have a way of opening, I don't know how to open this door. But if I've got a way of opening the door, and the door is a door to the mind, and it is not only to the mind, it can be to the heart, the interest. If I can create the curiosity, I can create the interest, everything is much easier. So a good lecture, when the door is open, can very easily be absorbed. But when the door is closed, it's very, very difficult, and it's not the most efficient way, especially not today that we've got technology. We've got technology of internet, we've got technology of ways to share information that will allow people to study much more effectively. I'm going to say a few words about the establishment of educational development centers and the role of educational development centers. This is, I believe, an international center. The RTC that I was involved in many years was the center, and they call me now the grandfather of the center in Laos and Cambodia and in Vietnam. I'm the grandfather. Why? Because I was involved in the 70s in creating the center. We then created center in the Philippines and in Korea, many activities in Japan and so forth. And now these centers are key players in creating the centers in Laos and Cambodia. So it's third generation. I strongly believe that every medical school and definitely every country needs to have a center with expertise in educational development. We need to have resource people who are interested in this area, who are good facilitators, and their job is to help to train teachers, to develop curriculum, to develop the assessment system, to develop the skill labs, to help to develop the school as a whole. And I think it is a specialty. It is something that it's not very difficult, but it is something that you need the talent and motivation to learn. And if we've got this kind of resource people, it is possible to implement, change, and improve. So we're talking about establishment of medical education unit, including fellowship for teachers. Sometimes it requires reassignment of duties to enable professional development for busy teachers in order to develop this expertise. It requires policies concerning the evaluation of teaching. We need to reward teaching in the evaluation, not only research, but also to reward good teachers. And we need policies which are promoting and remunerating good teachers and ensuring the continuous quality. These are different levels that we can do it. At the minimum, we can have some individuals who act as mentors for those resource people. We can identify some individuals and we can invite them to become mentors to others. They can go and observe how other people are teaching, and they can give some feedback, They can give some ideas for new teachers. So this is the function of a mentor or a resource person. In some places, this is institutionalized. We've got a committee, and the committee already is organizing this activity. It's not only done individually, but there is a committee making sure that this is applied everywhere. Or we can have a university-wide or faculty-wide center, like we've got here. Or we can have decentralized unit at the departmental and so forth. But all of this is influenced by the accreditation requirement, by the leadership, by the culture of the institutions and the resources. The bottom line is we need these resource people. How we organize it can be different from place to place, according to your situation. In the context of Laos and Cambodia, where we are working now, we are saying that we need to cultivate a pool of resource people to support educational development, so that this is available when it is needed. Right now, what happens, every time they need to do something with the curriculum, they create a committee, a new committee, another committee, but there is never any expertise. There is never any follow-up. It is starting and it is stopping, and the people that come may not have any experience in how to do it. So we need to mobilize expertise. We need to coordinate development effort. For example, in Laos, there is many partners. This center from here is contributing in Laos. I'm doing work in Laos. There is at least 5 or 6 other bodies from other countries. We need to coordinate. Otherwise, it is very confusing for the institution. Here they get Japanese ideas, here they get Korean ideas, here they get Australian ideas, here they get many, many ideas from different places. But unless there is one center that is the platform for coordination, it's very, very difficult for them to implement in a good way. And we need the technical support. I was asked many times, and this is maybe why I was invited to give this presentation today, how come the center that I was a director for almost 30 years, why did it succeed? What was the secret of that center? At the time, we had quite a lot of influence. We had almost 3,000 people from all over the world who came to study with us. A few hundreds did master degrees, but 3,000 came for different kind of activities. We had very close relationship with the Japan Society for Medical Education, and Dr. Hori from Tsukuba University, with President Oshiba, that did the medical education here. The whole Mount Fuji workshop concept that continued here started with us. We came first and did it with them, and it continued for many years. From Japan, there was another interesting thing. At the beginning, the first 10 years, they sent to us always the potential leader from the Ministry of Health, people that were designated to become leaders in the Ministry of Health. And the purpose of sending them, I think, was not only to learn about education, but also to give them international exposure, culture, English, interaction with other countries. So I think many of the people that became later the leaders with WHO and with the international thing came through this experience. For example, one that comes to my mind is Hiroki Nakatani, who is now the number 2 in WHO in Geneva. So he did his master with us, and Shinozaki, and many of the people in the Ministry of Health came through this movement. What we had that was very good for us, we had good support and good resources. we had a high-level coordination committee that was chaired by the regional director of WHO, and that was very important because he came, then the Ministry of Health people have to come, and the important people have to come together and support. With a strong affiliation with WHO, the host institution and the government recognized the strategic importance of it and also supported, and we have available expertise and resources. Now, for me, what made the difference was that we were not only in the classroom, we were in the field. Within, after 3 months, when I joined the center, already they sent me to Papua New Guinea to do some work. And later they sent me to China, and later they sent me to many, many countries to do work. At the beginning, maybe what I did was not so first class, but I learned by doing. And when I come back to the class, I can give example for what I learned in the field. So it was a different thing. By becoming involved in the field, we developed relationship, and we developed understanding, and we learned to work in different cultures, and we understand different attitudes and different perspectives. I think this was a very, very important aspect of the way we did the field. Strategic focus on area of contribution. So we didn't try to do everything, but we tried to identify which areas we were able to make a difference. I don't know if the word system thinking is meaningful to you, but to me it's a very, very important thing. You cannot make change, you cannot improve anything unless you understand the system as a whole. And I think just like the biological system, there is a social system, and we need to understand how things work in a system. And the importance of facilitation skills and cultural competence were very, very important. At that time, like everything new, we had a pioneering mentality. We were very proud, and we were thinking very enthusiastic, because it was a time, it was new. There were intimate relationship, everybody knew everybody by name, and there was a network, meeting everywhere, high level of commitment, passionate, tight network, based on trust and friendship, and interprofessional, in the sense that it was not only doctors, it was doctors and nurses and other health professions. That was also very, very important. And there were opportunities for staff development. The lessons that we've learned is that it's very important to assess the readiness for change. You cannot change things if people are not ready. You have to find the right speed and the right pace for that. Individuals alone cannot achieve institutional change. It is not enough to train the teacher. We need to develop the department. We need to develop the team. We need to develop the curriculum. We need to develop the institution as a whole, the system. Because if you expect the teacher to come and to do some training, and then the teacher to go by themselves and to do the change, they cannot. So this is why the concept of teacher training by itself, I don't believe. Teacher training is only part of a development system. We need to look how to develop the institution, all the way from the leadership, the key people, the way we organize a department, the way we communicate, the way we plan. All of these things are very, very important, and we learned it very early that there is no possibility to only train the teachers. You have to look at the system. For this, we needed to get the powerful people on our side. We need to do politics. Without the support of the powerful people, it is not possible to bring this change. Importance of culture, policy, incentive. starting with where the learner's interest, and a lot of support is required, especially when you start something new. This is now, and this is what I'm going to finish with, the priorities that we've got in Laos and Cambodia experience, to explain what I mean, not only teacher training. First of all, we found out that the problem is that they were taking too many students. They were taking more students than they are capable of training properly. That means that many students are not getting appropriate clinical practice, appropriate supervision, because there are too many students. The classroom is too big. So we are saying you have to limit the intake according to the capacity of the institution and according to the needs of the country. Focusing on the curriculum, making sure that everybody understands the competencies that are important and that the whole curriculum is focusing on the competencies. This is the starting point. For us, the starting point is not a textbook, it's not the latest scientific theory, it is starting with the competency. Improving the skills of the teachers, of course, in every aspect. Teachers need to learn how to be a facilitator. Developing the capacity for educational development. I talked about improvement of creating the educational development centers. Strengthening the leadership, the management, the governance. If the leaders don't understand, if the leaders are not supporting, if we don't have good organization, we cannot implement the improvement. So what we are doing is we are formulating quality standards. These are not only ethical, but all kind of standards, how to run the department. Strengthening the link between the school and the clinical side. Maybe you take it for granted. I think many of your schools have got a hospital, but in some countries there is separation, and the school does not have good relationship with the hospital. So when they send the student to the hospital, they don't get supervision. They don't get enough support. How do we create this linkage between the school and the hospital to make sure that there is good practice? And that requires a lot of coordination. The whole area of learning resources, again, maybe for you it's for granted that there is a library and there is computers and there is internet and students can afford to buy, but especially in the developing countries, the students don't have any learning resources. What is not available in the lecture is not available. So we need to think about how to develop lecture notes, basic materials that the student can use in order to study by themselves. And sometimes it requires translation of material from other languages. Improving the availability and maintenance of essential equipment, including online facility. Basic things like renovating and constructing facilities. The facilities are very basic, not enough space, not conducive for learning. Strengthening the contribution of training institutions for in-service. Strengthening the exchange and support among institutions, like we want the hospital in the central level to support the hospital in the provincial level, in the district level, to create a network of support. And finally, to engage the teachers in scholarly and research activities. So these are the key objectives of the project that we are doing now, and you can see they are not only focusing on teacher, they are focusing on the whole system. The organization, the facilities, the material, the curriculum, the whole thing. because only if we can develop the whole system, we can create a better education. So this is the work that I'm lucky that I can do now after I retired from my full-time job at the university. I've got more time now to travel and to work in developing countries like Laos, Cambodia, and it looks like I'm going to start now also in Burma, because Burma is now also opening and I'm ready to start doing some work. And we always start from the macro level, from understanding the need for the human resources, and then we go down to the training institutions and try to develop good training institutions that can supply the necessary. So this is the story.
Now open for question and comment. YouTube の放送を続けてもいいし、やめてもいいです。どっちでも。どうぞ質問とか。
How many different centers or offshoots from what you do have you visited here in Japan, and how are they different?
To be honest, in Japan I did not have a chance in recent times to develop. I understand that there is very active interest in medical education in Japan, but from the place that I'm actually working, the news is not too good, in the sense that I think there is still very much reliance on what I might call didactic approaches rather than interactive approaches. But this is not a medical school that I'm talking about, so really I cannot answer this question very well. What is your opinion? What other people think? Is it still very didactic, traditional, or is there a strong movement toward interactive, student-focused kind of thing in medical schools, nursing school, and so forth in Japan? What is other people's experience? I think it's an important question. Are we making progress in Japan? I know, for example, about one school we talked about before that I was involved. This is a private school in Saitama. I know that they've changed. They moved to, and I know that Tsukuba University, Professor Hori, that told me a lot that he couldn't come. I know that they've done it very, very early as well. So I know that there is some very innovative schools, but I'm not sure what is the general.
In my area, this is a pharmaceutical company's training. They are changing learning style from lecture to the group work. But as you mentioned, as a whole systematic approach is not yet actually.
Professor Harvard University.
It is changing now. It is changing now. So and I'm involved in a small group teaching, and that is a very good way, I think. And so, can I ask you one question? You use the word competency so many times, and that is a very important word, I think. Do something, can't do something. So, but I understand the word, but I don't know what it really means. I mean, can I? Okay, please.
Okay, I guess in the most basic way, in my mind, and again, I don't like when something becomes too pedantic, like the objectives, the SBA, and sometimes we can become too pedantic. But the most important thing about it comes from the word competent, to be competent. We say that our graduates need to be competent to do some things. It's not only technical, it's also competent as a person, as a professional. But basically, we need to be clear about what it is that we want them to be competent to do after they graduate, and how they can acquire this competence during the course. They cannot get the final competence immediately. It may come in stages. But finally, we have to make sure that we link together the whole curriculum, so we map it in such a way that at the end of the day, they will leave us with some competence, some ability, something to do. I think that the process of clarifying what this is very important. Because when we know what it is, then we can make sure that when we design the examination, we examine that. For example, in Cambodia now, because there is such variability in the quality of education between the private schools and the public schools, and very, very big variability, there is agreement to have a national exam, national exit exam. And the exit exam is based on some assumption about competencies. So there was a working group made up of senior people that were thinking about what is the competence that we want to make sure that to examine before we give the license to the doctor to work. This is basically what it is. It is defining what you must be able to do to get the license to perform as a professional. Clearly, at different stages in the career, you will be more competent and there will be more expectations. But even the graduate from the basic school need to have some competence.
So, would you tell me how many, the number of the competencies? 60 or 800 or more than that?
No. I think that you can group them obviously in different ways, whether you're looking at the subject, at the particular course, or you're looking overall. But when I'm looking for the overall, what we might call the core competency, I would not like to see more than 10 core competencies. And that has to do with the ability, I guess, to elicit the information from the patient and to make diagnosis and to deal with so forth. But then, of course, you can divide it. You can say that every graduate should be able to handle competently X number of clinical cases. You identify 100, 200 common clinical cases that you want them to be able to manage. Okay? So it can come at different levels, the definition of competency. In some ways, it's not different from objectives. In some ways, there is a lot of similarity. The objective is expressing competency. But it's a way of thinking, because what are we trying to get away from is that every teacher likes to teach what they know. They like to teach about the research that they do, something that they feel very interested in, and something they know a lot about. But they don't think enough about what the student must know in order to be able to perform in practice. The movement to competency is really shifting the way of thinking. It's not what you know, it's what the student needs to know in order to be competent practitioner. That's the idea.
In this year, Tokyo University, we are changing to so-called outcome-based learning. So this summer, we will decide our competency. Maybe the first competence is research competence or research. Tokyo University. Maybe. I'm not sure.
It's legitimate. It is, you know, if you want, if this is the special angle, as long as this is not the only, but it's quite legitimate. My university did the same, because you're saying that there is few universities that are producing the leaders in the field and so forth. I think it's legitimate to use research, but then you have to show how you do it. How you do it. For example, in some universities, like in University of New South Wales, the student has to take time off to do an in-depth study, you know, to focus very deeply into a particular area and to produce a thesis. For example, if that's really what you, it's okay, as long as. Another word, by the way, for competency that is used in the literature is attributes. What is the attribute of the graduate? And there we are trying to say it's more than technical, it's also personality, professional, it's the person, it's the professional skills, it's the cognitive skills. So you are going beyond competent to do something clinical to some attribute of the person, which is also examined as part of it.
I understand your reluctance to give a list or a number of the total competencies, but it would really help if, well, it's a fuzzy concept. And for example, I'm sure that you've dealt with this in other situations, but who judges whether candidate X has those competencies or not? And you can't evaluate all of them at the same time. So is there some way to group them or categorize them that would help us to understand what has to be included and what can be overlooked? And is there a progression in them, you know, from the most basic to something that you would only expect a fourth year or sixth year student or yet a fellow to be able to attain?
There's definitely a progression, so that's for sure. And there are examples, and I don't have them with me, but I'm quite willing to share maybe for you, you know, to share some examples from other places. I know, for example, that the China Medical Board, which is a body that is dealing in medical education, at some stage identified 60 essential objectives. And they are divided into things to do with the clinical, as distinct from communication, as distinct from professional networking, and so they are kind of clustered in different ways. And as I said, I'm quite happy to share some examples, but I think the answer is there could be progression. They tend to be clustered, and definitely one is recognizing now the three key areas. One being the actual knowledge that you need to know about the science, about medicine itself. There are things to do with the development of the personality of the person as a learner, as a professional, and there are things to do with interactional, things to do with interacting with other people and communication and so forth. This is quite a typical way of dividing the different competencies.
So, for example, personality, how is that evaluated by a medical board, or is it in interviews? And that would be just one. Communication skills, well, I think I understand a little bit how that would be evaluated, but you mentioned again that could include knowledge, facts, but I thought that was something that you left in a different category, and that competence is something above and beyond that.
it's really being a professional. It has to do with cognitive skills, ethical and cognitive skills. There is a whole kind of academic literacy and learning how to learn, and things to do there in terms of knowledge management, ability to access information and utilize information. So it's a combination, if you like, it's not only attitude, but it's also very, very specific cognitive skills that one needs that are distinct from skills in doing something or in knowing something. It's a more enduring one that one is looking at. For example, evidence that one has got the skill for lifelong learning, that one can continue to learn, that one is self-directed, and you can examine it by giving student assignments that require them to demonstrate the ability to use their cognitive skills. I'm not sure if you are familiar, for example, with Bloom taxonomy, where there is anything from just memorizing.
Know how to teach, etc.
The Bloom taxonomy goes up to really being able to, beyond understanding, to comprehending, to applying, to analyzing, to evaluating. So it's really, each one of them are cognitively a more demanding skill than the other. And we can, through popular education, get people to do more than just being able to repeat something that they've heard, to be able to really integrate it, to do with it something else. And this is, by the way, a problem that we see even with our PhD students. They've never learned how to, for example, read literature in a critical way. I very often get students and we ask them to do a critical review of the literature. And they said, how can I am a student, how can I be critical? They wrote books, and you ask me to be critical, so the whole concept of what is a critical review of the literature, how to do a critical review of the literature, is a skill which is not taken for granted.
So can I ask about one question about cultural competence? In this handout, it is written twice. One is with communication skill, and another is with facilitation skills. So, but I cannot imagine about the cultural competence, what it is. So could you tell me?
Cultural competence?
Yes. The kind of examples or easily, please.
When let's say a cardiologist in a country which is multicultural, like Australia, for example, has to explain things to patients from different cultures, they need to learn to explain it in different ways. When they talk to a patient from Arabic background, there are certain ways of explaining. They also need to realize that stereotypically, the wife will be in control of certain things. There's all kind of things which are associated with understanding, and now we cannot be experts in every culture, but we have to recognize and accept that the people from different cultures have got different meanings, different values, and if we want to help them, we have to be sensitive to that. So that's part of the problem.
Any other question? I think evaluation for the knowledge skill is easy, but communication or professionalism is very, very, very difficult. So many discussions, no answer.
No easy answer.
Whenever I hear the word professionalism used, then I'm curious because I'm wondering where or when somebody can step in and say, well, it's this, right? And I think I understand the principle, but how you're going to actually be able to judge this and give a judgment on another person. Basically, you're saying, well, if I'm a professional, I know another professional when I see him or see her. So if I know how to play the guitar, I know if somebody is faking it in a movie, for example. But just where that begins and where it ends, and if I were evaluating somebody's ability to play a guitar, can I score it from 1 to 100, or is it just yes or no, pass or fail? All of these things seem so fuzzy and so slippery. And how do you work that into an institutional setting?
I've got a way to answer that, but I don't think it will satisfy anybody. What I say is that if something is worthwhile evaluating, it's worthwhile evaluating even if we can't do it very well. And if something is not worthwhile evaluating, it's not worthwhile evaluating even if we can do it very well. Just to, there is a story about a man that lost a coin in a very dark street. There was no light, and he lost the coin. So a little bit time later, they saw him looking for the coin in another street. They say, why are you looking for the coin here? You lost it over there. He said, because there is no light over there. This is the problem. We evaluate what is easy to evaluate. Multiple choice question, memory is easy. We can do it mechanistically and so forth. But if we come to the conclusion that this is not enough, then we have to take the next step and to look for ways to evaluate things which are not easy. And it may be that we don't exactly give grades from 1 to 10, but we give other kind of assessments. I think that OSCE, for example, is a technique that is being used. You're expert more than me in that, in the use of OSCE, which is a way of looking at the performance of somebody. And it is possible then to look at attitude as well as whether the person is asking the right questions, whether they are showing sensitivity. The whole attitude that they are showing can be looked at and can be taken into consideration. It's not easy, but it's important. And I think that this is giving the message. It's the message that we are giving to the students. The students are very adaptable organisms. They want to succeed. They will do whatever they believe we are going to pay attention to. And they learn it very quickly. So if they see that we only pay attention to something but not to another thing, it is very comfortable for them to act. Because they say, later in life we will do what we want. Here we are, we have to do what the professor wants us to do. And I think that we need to think about that and to give the messages to them about what is important. I'm not saying it's easy.
Evaluation is very, very difficult, but important. This message is also important. Professor Onishi, any comment?
Closing comment. So I met Professor Ali in Laos, and after that I found his name in the list of the member emeritus in the Japan Society for Medical Education, and I found twice this very big person is very important for Japanese medical education. So thank you very much for coming to have a very nice lecture with us. And I enjoyed the discussion with the participants today.
So, acknowledgement. We greatly appreciate Professor Ali Broughton, Emeritus Professor at the University of Southern New South Wales, for his lecture entitled "What We Learn About Promoting Development of Medical Education, the RPTC Experience," the University of Tokyo. Kiyoshi
Thank you very much for your patience and for your.
Thank you too.
どうもありがとうございました。じゃあ、アンケートに書いていただいて、お答えください。で、今ディスカッションのあったテーマについて、来月の医学教育セミナー、7月25日ですが、イギリスのマンチェスター大学のティム・デビット先生に来ていただいて、イギリスでやっている The Fitness to Practice という概念について、お話しいただきました。フィットネス to Practice は、プロフェッショナリズムよりもっとレベルが低い話かもしれませんが、今イギリスの医学教育は極めて重要で、トゥモローズ・ドクターに引き続いて、医師に向かない医者、医師にしたくない医者みたいな感じで、いろいろ取り組みがなされています。ぜひ来月もよろしくお願いします。どうもありがとうございました。